Thank you for attending the People's Response Network and Quinn Chapel AME's press conference. My name is Lynette Sims, spelled Lonettettsims, and I will be the moderator for today's press conference. This weekend is the 30th anniversary of the Chicago 1995 Heatwave. We have an art installation to represent the heat deaths per 100,000. The heat deaths per 100,000 illustrate which community areas had the most deaths during the 1995 heat wave. Additionally, we invite you to join us at 7 p.m. to our film screening of Cook Survival by Zip Code at Quinn Chapel AME. As I stand here, there's an image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. right above our heads. Dr. King spoke at Quinn Chapel. As I stand here, there's an image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King spoke at Quinn Chapel AME, and he lived in North Lawndale. Bronzeville and North Lawndale were negatively impacted by redlining. The results from the activation day of the Chicago Urban Heat Island Project, referenced as Cool Shot 23 on the Chicago Department of Public Health's website, found that there was a 22-degree difference in temperature during the afternoon heat data collection period, a 22-degree difference. Neighborhoods that were redlined are 22 degrees hotter than non-redline neighborhoods. Redline neighborhoods have less tree canopy, closer to the expressways, for example, the Dan Ryan Expressway that's near us, and close to railroads. We want the city of Chicago to implement a Cool Pavements pilot program and a Cool Roofs pilot program, starting with the community areas that are most heat burdened. The Chicago 1995 heat wave should be taught to Chicago Public School students. And our first speaker for today is Pastor Troy Venning of Quinn Chapel AME.
Hey, my name's Troy, T-R-O-Y, middle initial K, last name Venning, V like Victor, E-N-N-I-N, G as in George. I'm the senior pastor here at Quinn Chapel AME Church. I'm also the president of the Ministerial Alliance of the AME Church in the city of Chicago and the vicinity. Quinn Chapel stands here because this is what we've always done. It is our responsibility to lift up the least, the lost, the left behind. And so when we think about how the climate has changed, not only politically, but also it's getting hotter and hotter as we move from day to day. The truth is, it becomes our responsibility to make sure that we highlight those issues. The gospel of Jesus Christ requires that in the Beatitudes that we take care of our brothers and sisters. And so it is important that we not just pray about things or not just talk about things. It's important that there becomes that you got to put feet on your prayer. And so we're asking really that those that have been trusted with power would do what it is they were called to do by the people that put them in office. That we would figure out ways to quell this issue, that we would figure out ways to keep people safe. I had an issue 2 weeks ago when it was super hot and in the 90s, and I was upset because my air conditioner wasn't cooling off my house as I thought it should. Now that's not an issue for everybody, but the thing that I highlight that because that's a privilege. The fact that I can pay the bill is a privilege. And so talking to some people who sat through the heat just a couple days ago and decided that, well, I don't know if my pocket can handle how hot it is outside, so let me open the window, let me put on a fan, let me try to stay cool. And staying cool, drinking water, it's good, it's necessary, but it's not enough. When we know that people are having trouble, when we know that people have issues, it is the people who need to respond and do for others, right? Just like the city calls people to make phone calls and check on seniors, the city and those in power, we just got to figure out what it is that we would do to make this better. It's about having conversation, but it's also about action. Because now we only have maybe 10, 12 super hot days a year. But as climate change rises, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter and colder as well. And so just in the same way that we require that landlords can't turn off your electricity in the wintertime because somebody might freeze to death, the same issue we saw in '95, that all of those people died just because nobody did anything or didn't know that they could. So thank y'all for being here. We're in full support of the people and the city of Chicago.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 25th Ward Alderman Byron Cicho Lopez.
Hola. Good afternoon and buenas tardes. Byron Cicho Lopez, Alderman of the 25th Ward, and I have also the privilege and honor to represent the 25th Ward, an immigrant working class community, as well as the chair of the Housing and Real Estate Committee of the City of Chicago. Today, when we remember one of the most tragic days in the city of Chicago, when 739 people died of a heat wave that affected principally majority poor communities, Black and brown communities. And those are the lives that continue to be at risk as we continue to see a federal government that neglects and dehumanizes communities. Poor communities is not an issue only of the immigrant community. The attacks on our city, the weaponization of federal dollars even to a city like Chicago that receives approximately $3.5 billion from the federal government. From the state government, the city of Chicago, let me just give you a quick example of how inequitable our revenue resources are. For every dollar that the city of Chicago pays the state of Illinois, we receive back 80 cents. While many other cities receive $1.20. So the inequities that we see in policy are not getting any better. And the climate change, despite of those in the White House who distract us from the real issues, are getting only worse. So as we remember this tragic day in the city of Chicago, when city government failed to protect the most vulnerable, this is a lesson to look at the past so that we can look forward at a better future when lives of Black and brown communities are not disposable. And today we have an opportunity with Mayor Johnson and his administration to really put ahead a plan that puts people's lives ahead of profit, ahead of bureaucracy, and ahead of those in the federal government that want to dismantle even further the EPA and many other safety nets that are urgent and critical for our city and the country. So I'm here today recommitting ourselves of being here as an ally, and I thank you all the organizations here because the task today is dire. Our federal dollars are at risk. Just to give an example, the Chicago Department of Health has about 80% of our budget that depends on the federal government. So these cuts will affect us tremendously, as climate change no doubt has changed. The risks also have increased, and we have a responsibility to provide people not only shelter, but also the ability to access green energy, to make sure that our shelters are equipped, to make sure that we treat people with dignity and respect. So today, as we remember this tragic day, I commit to work with all of us and to make sure that in the state of Illinois, we talk about revenue that taxes the rich and not penalizes the poor, and that we fight Trump with actions and an example here in the city of Chicago of what working class communities can do when we have a government that works for us and not for the 1%. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
En español brevemente voy a tratar de resumir lo más rápido posible, pero muy importante y gracias. Byron Cicho López, concejal del Distrito 25, y agradezco a todas las organizaciones que recuerdan la memoria, porque la historia no está muerta y nunca puede morir. Nosotros creemos que es importante el día de hoy más que nunca el recomprometernos con el compromiso de prevenir una tragedia más que cobró la vida de 739 personas en la ciudad de Chicago hace 30 años. Este compromiso es recordar la historia que se puede volver a repetir si no tomamos acciones y medidas urgentes. Necesitamos actuar en la ciudad para que nuestra infraestructura de vivienda tenga los dispositivos que permitan prevenir más tragedias, que debemos invertir en vivienda, en albergues, en prepararnos para el cambio climático, y lo que hemos visto del gobierno federal es vergonzoso, cómo se distraen de los temas de fondo, cómo se malgastan los dineros, billones de dólares, que deberían utilizarse para vivienda y para proteger la vida de nuestras personas, y hoy se utilizan para perseguir, para atacar, para aterrorizar comunidades y no para proteger a la comunidad. Por eso estoy aquí, para comprometernos a trabajar en la ciudad, con el Estado, y proteger a nuestra ciudad de los ataques fascistas, la desinversión y la desigualdad que han cobrado ya demasiadas vidas. Así que recordamos estos 3 años con un compromiso de acción y de acción para proteger a nuestra ciudad, especialmente a los más vulnerables. Muchas gracias.
Our next speaker is Martine Carrillo. She is the Executive Director of Ujima Medics and a public health nurse. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So Ujima Medics has spent years talking to residents in our trainings about emergency preparedness skills, first response skills, community care, and we all have been getting the same message. When it comes to our health, when it comes to our safety, our well-being, we are on our own. That is the message we've been getting from public officials, elected officials, and those adjacent to them for decades. And that's a message we continue to receive. If you want us to have a different message, have a different point of view about this, you will behave differently. You will do what these people are asking you to do. You will listen to your constituents when we come to talk to you about the need to invest in environmental justice, such as the Hazel M. Johnson ordinance. We will be talking to you about that, right? We're going to talk to you about the Public Health and Safety Coalition, which is demanding redirection of $200 million from the budget into health and safety, into the Department of Public Health, into the Chicago Fire Department, into youth jobs, into public health, into mental health, into the care response teams. This is what we're asking you to do. This is what we're demanding you to do. If you want us to believe that we are not on our own. Everybody else that's watching this, we know what you know. We know that people will step up, we will take care of each other, we will care for each other, we will have to do. But if you're a public official watching this, I want you to imagine that a disaster like this, a disaster like what happened in 1995, that it happens on your watch. It happens to your constituent, it happens to your ward. What are you going to do to prevent it? What are you going to do? You can start with listening and actually treating the budget like the moral document that it is. It shows what we care about. It shows what we are interested in protecting. So act like you know. That's it.
Our next speaker is Eliana Haven. She is a housing community organizer for Access Living Metropolitan Chicago. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ileana Haven. I'm the housing organizer at Access Living, a center for independent living led by and for people with disabilities. My name is spelled ILIANAHAVEN. So as we mark this important anniversary and reflect on the devastating heat wave, we must acknowledge a painful truth. The city of Chicago has not made the progress we need to prevent that kind of tragedy from happening again. The fact that just this Juneteenth, the city closed most of its cooling centers shows who this city prioritized, and it's not us. Only 1 of 6 city-operated cooling centers were open on Juneteenth holiday, and all of Chicago's more than 80 public libraries were closed. In 1995, more than 739 people died during a single heat wave, mostly Black, elderly, and disabled residents living alone without air conditioning in under-resourced neighborhoods. Today, nearly 30 years later, disabled people remain disproportionately harmed by extreme weather. According to the National Council on Disability, people with disabilities are 2 to 4 times more likely to be injured or die in natural disasters, including heat waves and floods. And research shows that Black and brown residents with disabilities are more likely to die during heat waves or frigid cold due to compounding barriers like housing discrimination, medical racism, and poverty. This is a matter of life and death, and yet Chicago still has serious gaps in its emergency infrastructure. There's no comprehensive, inclusive emergency response plan that fully incorporates the needs of disabled people, including accessible transportation and home support and community access. Shelters remain physically inaccessible, forcing disabled residents to rely on a limited number of options. Digital emergency alerts and resources remain inaccessible for many, especially those who are deaf, blind, or who have intellectual or developmental disabilities. When disaster hits, disabled people should not be left behind or treated as an afterthought. We need truly accessible and adequately resourced shelters across the city, 24/7 access to cooling centers, particularly during heat emergencies, emergency planning that includes disabled people at every step from design to implementation, accessible public transportation and paratransit options during crises, inclusive communication strategies that reach people in multiple formats, languages, and access needs. And above all, we need our city to show its residents that we matter, that our lives are worth protecting, and that we deserve the dignity of living in safe, accessible conditions before, during, and after a crisis. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elijah Griggs. Elijah is a People's Response Network volunteer. He also volunteered during the Cool Shy Heat Mapping Project of 2023.
Hello everyone. As Lynette mentioned, I helped during the heat mapping project in 2023. Something about that really surprised me was that the Gage Park route was one of the hottest routes recorded during that project. And a few years later, this year, I decided to do a mapping project about how many bus shelters are actually in the Gage Park neighborhood. I decided to do one of the busiest streets there, up and down Kedzie from 59th all the way to about 47th, where the Kedzie Orange Line is. And out of the total of 12 stops, only 4 were sheltered. And most of that is just open concrete, asphalt. Some are even right next to the steel mill right there. So during summers alone, it gets really hot in those areas. During dangerous heat waves like this, it's even worse because students like me are forced to rely on public transit. And most of the time, there are a lot of families and elderly who also wait at the bus stops and take the public transit. So the issue that I would like to have resolved is at least start getting better shelters in the south side area as far as the bus stops go. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Geraldine Luna. Dr. Geraldine Luna is representing Medical Organization for Latino Advancement. Thank you.
My message is in Spanish because one of the things that we faced in 1995, and it's the reason we're commemorating this date today, is that very little, almost none, has changed. We saw Black and brown communities highly devastated, and today, we don't even know the number of Latinos that died that day. So that is horrifying to learn that there's no justice. If we don't know data, there cannot be policy changes. Without policy changes, there cannot be a response. Hoy estamos celebrando el 30 aniversario de lo que fue una gran tragedia aquí en Chicago que marcó en 1995 y cobró la vida de 732 personas, en su mayoría personas mayores, solas, viviendo en condiciones precarias. Una crisis silenciosa. Y en muchos sentidos, esa crisis se pudo haber evitado. Pero hay una realidad aún más dolorosa. No hay cifras claras de cuántos latinos murieron ese día. Nuestra comunidad fue invisible a los datos, por lo tanto invisible a la respuesta oficial. Sin datos no hay política pública, no hay recursos, no hay justicia. Hoy con el cambio climático las olas de calor son más frecuentes, más intensas y letales. Y la comunidad latina sigue siendo vulnerable. Vivimos en zonas donde hay menos árboles, menos aire acondicionado, muchas veces con barreras para accesar los servicios de emergencia, ya que por el idioma o por el miedo la gente no busca asistencia. 30 años después no podemos permitir que se repite la historia, pero muy poco ha cambiado. Aún hoy carecemos de un plan de contingencia comunitario. Por eso estamos aquí exigiendo que los planes de emergencia incluyan a los latinos desde el principio, con datos desglosados, centros de enfriamiento accesible, campañas de prevención en español. Culture and language do matter. Y el liderazgo de nuestras organizaciones comunitarias y gubernamentales. El calor mata, sí, pero también mata la ineficiencia y el abandono institucional. Y hoy honramos a las víctimas levantando las voces por aquellas que aún están en riesgo. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Margarita Reina. Margarita Reina is a community epidemiologist, and she also provided the health data and graphics by community area that are on display today. So thank you.
Hi, buenos días. My name is Margarita Reina Guerrero, M-A-R-G-A-R-I-T-A, Reina R-E-I-N-A, Guerrero G-U-E-R-R-E-R-O. In 1996, I was an epidemiology graduate student at the University of Illinois in Chicago, only 1 year after the heat wave that took 739 Chicagoans. As a community organizer, long before being a graduate student in public health, I understood the impact of structural racism that shape the social and political inequities that we see when communities of color get sick and die at rates much higher than whites. When I was a student under Dr. Steve Whitman in 1997, I knew that I had found my mentor and public health hero. I not only wanted to use data, but also a community-centered approach to better understand public health epidemics. I was going to become a social epidemiologist. Upon graduating in 1999, I went to work under Steve Whitman at the Chicago Department of Public Health before he left 4 months later to start the Sinai Urban Health Institute, SUHI. He continued to be my mentor. We collaborated on research in HIV, breast cancer mortality, and birth outcomes until he passed in 2015. In 2014, I officially became a social epidemiologist for the city of Chicago until I left CDPH in 2024. Steve Whitman continues to shape my work, whereas communities are most impacted by environmental justice, violence, traffic deaths, opiate overdose deaths, COVID-19, and serious mental health issues. Epidemiologists have to understand what puts these communities at risk of increased death when their white counterparts have significantly lower rates of disease and death. To disentangle why some neighborhoods face higher rates of heat-related deaths, we need to examine three main factors. First, deep social isolation and declining local infrastructure. We saw this during COVID-19 pandemic as communities of color had limited access to COVID-19 testing and vaccines, with pharmacy deserts on the south and west sides of Chicago. Secondly, to prevent illness from extreme heat, we need to improve outreach to elderly residents living alone, especially those without air conditioning. And finally, we need to strengthen community networks to build it, just like this. In the more than 30 years in public health, these maps of disease and death haven't changed much. But now is the time to connect with our neighbors, build social capital, and educate our impacted communities so that we can all flourish as we all face environmental factors that put everyone at risk. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Howard Ehrman. He's the founder of People's Responsibility.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I want to thank Reverend Troy Benning, Mrs. Shirley Moses, from the Quinn Chapel AME Church. Not only the most historic church in Chicago, but one of the most historic churches in the United States in history, the site of the Underground Railroad beginning in the 1840s. It's no coincidence that we're standing here under a plaque of Dr. Martin Luther King. I am a street kid from the south side of Chicago. I grew up at a time that existed until 1986, where in the winter, whether you were black or white, if you were working class on the south side and your landlord did not live in your building, you had no heat. Our parents would bundle us up. I was born in 1947, and it would be 40 to 45 degrees when we would wake up. Everybody here who's my age or even a little bit younger knows that until Mayor Richard J. Daley made it illegal to sleep on the beach, that hundreds of thousands of Chicagoans would sleep in the park and sleep in the beach until the 1968 Democratic Convention, when he used that as a tool of racism, as a tool of class oppression, so that people would either have to get air conditioning or die. My family from Bohemia moved to 18th and Halsted 150 years ago this year, and I live in Little Village in the only house we've ever had for 42 years, a mile and a half south of where Dr. King lived in the summer of 1966. And guess what? To nobody's surprise, we have 1 to 2 blackouts from Roosevelt Road down to I-55 every year for 42 years. Every year, including 3 weeks ago. We called Commonwealth Edison. We had people in North Lawndale. We had people in Little Village call Commonwealth Edison. And you know when they called us back? A couple of days ago, 3 weeks after it happened, and said they're checking on it. This is the kind of structural racism that is going to cause people to die or who have already died this summer. But we also need to talk about solutions. And I'm very glad that at least one elected official showed up. We did invite everyone. Because this is what we need to do. We have a dual power strategy where first and foremost we have to build out local networks. We have to take all the positive things that Ojima Medics and other groups have been doing and now begin to organize people where they want to be organized, on their block, in their school, in their church, in their mosque, in their workplace, where people are going to die this summer, whether they're outside workers, who throughout the country are mostly Latino and African American. We're standing less than a mile and a half from the largest union local of the National Association of Letter Carriers, which is predominantly African American, not only in Chicago, but throughout the United States, and where one of our brothers died 2 years ago in Dallas at the end of a shift delivering the mail. We also have the other side of the dual power strategy is to support and to push the city, the county, and the state in particular to do the right thing. So here's a couple of examples. Our mayor, Brandon Johnson, ran on a platform and has talked about this since of having a public bank. Why do we need a public bank, and what has that got to do with this particular terrible tragedy? It has everything to do with it, because redlining still exists. If you are black and brown in a predominant neighborhood of Chicago, try to get a loan to either buy your house or fix your house in 2025 and see how easy that is. It's not easy at all. Whether it's Chase or any other big banks, they're going to give you a problem. So establishing a public bank and getting rid of currency exchanges is a huge issue that's directly related to this problem. The other thing that Mayor Johnson said last month is the ultra-rich have got to pay for the CTA. They've got to pay for Metra. They've got to pay for PACE. In this city, 1 out of 3 people has to rely on transit. They are not car optional. In North Lawndale, that's 51%. Where I live in Little Village, it's 44%. So we need to have better public transit than we have, and we need to do what 125 cities have done, including Kansas City, Albuquerque, and soon to be London, and that is get the funding and make it free. We need to have this year in September that all CPS students do and get what New York high school students do and what Los Angeles students do and get free public transit now. These are just some of the issues. And lastly, we want to invite people to come back tonight. Doors open at 6 o'clock, because this will not just be a film and a discussion. It will be a working meeting to learn how to use certain applications on your phone that you can then teach others, that you can then organize on your block, that will unite to thrive and save lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Kathy Powers. She is a Chicago poet.
Hi everybody, I'm Kathy Powers, Kathypowers. I wrote a little poem for today, and I call it the melting cups. We come here today to this field of cups. We remember our losses and breathe together. We are the new cups, containing our life force. Our ancestors remind us to stay connected. We have each other to help in our strife. We keep us safe. We are one together. We come here today to this field of cups. We remember our losses and grieve together. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes our press conference. We would like to ask if any of the reporters have any questions for any of our speakers.
Thank you for all the comments, if you can hear me okay. I was just wondering if there's anyone here, maybe some of the speakers or maybe someone who didn't get a chance to speak, who just wanted to share what those days were like before they were hurt. And perhaps if there was a loved one of theirs or a neighbor or someone who they knew was affected.
Testimonials of their 1995.
Just for like that was
what was it like to lost someone?
Yeah. Sure. I think this.
Oh, it was?
Yeah. I want to hear from you too.
Okay. My name is Caesar. So I'm gonna speak a little informally. So I experienced a family tragedy, and I had to go to a new school, and so part of integrating into that school, it was hard for me. And my dad's best friend named Teddy, we talk about like Star Trek books and taught me how to play chess. And like I feel like chess was super important to actually encouraging me to join this chess club, where I met some of my lifelong friends who I'm still friends with to this day since high school, and really helped me just like kind of escape the depression I was in. And Teddy, he was my, like I said, he was my dad's best friend. He was a person that I would see a lot, but he always was there for me. You know, he really like helped me kind of recover from this during a time when I feel like, you know, I didn't even know what the word depression meant. Nobody talked about it. I didn't see anybody about it. But he died in an attic apartment from a heat stroke. You know, and you know, people found him and he never woke up. And that's just a person that was robbed from us. That he should not have died that day. You know, he should have been in a better situation. He should have had air conditioning. He should have had a place to sleep where it wasn't 100 degrees. And so that's all I really wanted to say. You know, but I appreciate you hearing me out.
Good afternoon. My name is Vanessa Willis, CRIM-Willis, WILLIS. I'm with the Chicago chapter of National Black Nurses. And what I remember about that time, addressing your question, is I was a home health nurse at that time. And trying to get the clients that I was taking care of help, it was impossible. We sent many people to the hospital. Many people couldn't open the doors to even let us in. We had to call the police to try and find out what was going on with them. That is my experience with that time. And as the Chicago chapter of National Black Nurses, we support this endeavor. We know that there are some discrepancies, some discriminations, and we call on the city of Chicago to help with all of the people that pay taxes. We all live here. This is not just for this group of people, but it's for all people in the city of Chicago. Thank you.
Ms. Vanessa, how did your clients do?
Some of them died. They died at the hospital because by the time you could get them hydrated. The problem is not only just the heat, but the hydration. And if you're aware, older people get very confused when they get dehydrated. And this is a pretty warm day today, so I do call on people. We do check on people. We go to the bank and do blood pressures and tell people about keeping well. That is our mission, is for people to keep well. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Gilbert Taylor, also a nurse and member of the Chicago Chapter National Black Nurses Association, and I do participate with PRN as well. I do not know personally anyone that died in the heat, to answer your question, but we took care of patients and people, and my mother knew a lot of them, and that's why my major field is elderly, to protect the elderly. I've seen all those vulnerable people die unnecessarily because they did not have air conditioning, move me into another path. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm Dr. Howard Ehrman. I'm the former Assistant Health Commissioner here in Chicago under Mayor Washington, and for a few years afterwards. And I want to make something very clear. I was a doctor at Cook County Hospital in the University of Illinois at Chicago. Most of the time during the heat wave, we felt completely useless because people either came in who literally died in the ambulance from heat stroke, or their body temperature, what we call the core temperature, was above 105, 106, 110, when it's impossible in most cases, particularly in 1995, to save them. But I want to clarify something that's been in the news both in Chicago and other places. In most cases, this is not a messaging problem. We reject completely the Office of Emergency Management and Communication having anything to do with our lives. This organization, which is part of the city government, was established by Mayor Richard M. Daley in response to this heat wave. We have spent over $4 billion on the right arm of the Chicago Police Department. They have refused over and over again to open up cooling or heating centers. When Alderman Byron Ciccio Lopez was Alderman-elect in 2019, he and myself called Commissioner Butler, who was the head of the Department of Family Services, to ask her to open up warming centers and libraries during 65-degree below temperature because of the polar vortex. She agreed a day later, and she was overruled by the head of OEMC. They never opened up. Dozens of people froze to death on the streets of Chicago. The city of Chicago not only has to do better, it must do better, otherwise it's going to have more deaths on its hands. So the last thing is the question of air conditioning. Air conditioning is a very contradictory question because every time you press the button, like Reverend Troy Benning did, it increases climate change and global warming. However, it's absolutely necessary. Do not tell people to just drink water and stay in the shade. That is not going to save most people. Do not think because more people may have one single air conditioner in one window of their house or apartment that they are safer, because guess what? Commonwealth Edison, who is raising again the electricity rates by 18%, it costs 4 times more by the end of this year to turn that air conditioner on. So right now, today, there are thousands of people here on the south, southwest, and west sides who have an air conditioner and they're not turning it on. So the city has to provide that with mobile CTA buses. They have to open up libraries. They've got to open up the cooling centers. Thank you very much.
Alderman, did you want to add something to that? Just your experience and how it's perhaps influenced what you do or what you hope happens?
Yeah, I think, and just like Dr. Howard mentioned, when I first got elected in 2018, we saw the multiple failures of our response to emergency and extreme weather. Now, for instance, after 8 years, we're going to have our first report of our first 5-year report on the state of the unhoused population. Because without an evaluation of what our systems are doing or not doing, we certainly cannot make changes that save lives. So we first, of course, have to make sure that we look at the past. That's what this is important, that we look at what happened 30 years ago, because as the communities saying and said it clearly, not much have changed, yet a lot of money is being spent on departments that, quite frankly, are not operating with the urgency and the dignity that our constituents are demanding. So we will be having in October of this year a 5-year review of the state of the unhoused, people with disabilities, veterans, people who are vulnerable, families, children, seniors who need an action plan. And the other step, of course, is the investment that is needed. We oftentimes that there's never enough money to respond to housing needs, to respond to public transit, to respond to climate change. But all of a sudden, when we need money for downtown development, all the money starts pouring in. $5 are being inadequately used and are starving the very communities where the money is needed. So what we want to make sure is that we talk at the responsibility of every level of government. We must find the resources to save lives, because lives and the sacredness of life for us is critical. That's what we're saying in the city of Chicago. We'll be looking at what the departments are doing. OEMC, there's a whole department that looks at public efficiencies, that we spend hundreds of millions of dollars, yet we don't find somehow the humanity, which is to not having shelters in extreme weather. The other thing is, of course, the responsibility of other levels of government. The state of Illinois, just last year, because we talk about revenue, but there's never revenue. The revenue is there. Last year, on November 20th, over 60% of people across the state voted to increase a little surcharge of 3% to people making more than $1 million that just received a huge tax break by President Trump. These people have a responsibility to contribute to the very city where all this wealth is created. That tax alone in the state level could generate $4.5 billion so that we have public transit, so that we can have buses when we also have emergencies, that we can open it up when needed, so that we don't have to starve our schools, that should be a place also for dignity and respect to our children, so that we can create more public housing and affordable housing. We cannot starve our communities with resources where the super rich have gotten the biggest transfer of wealth in history. $1 trillion that they got from President Trump, which also now to our city is also trying to weaponize federal funding and is playing with $3.5 billion that perhaps never reached the Department of Health, never reached the Department of Housing, and many other key departments. So this is a level of responsibility locally. Our communities are coming together. I'm glad to hear the stories, the testimonies, because they have to be a call for action. Elected officials in City Council have to take this as the chair of housing. I urge members of the City Council to put the interests of the public first and not the billionaires and those donors who continue to tell them no to the tax the rich, no to look at solutions, but the money exists. What is broken is what is broken are all priorities. I think the people are clearly stating what's needed.
I just wanted to follow up. You mentioned that not much has changed. For instance, this most recent heat wave, 2-3 weeks ago. What were you hearing from people in your ward? About the conditions and maybe some of the challenges they were dealing with. Were there still challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, like some things that maybe changed a bit is like, unlike maybe previous administrations when we used some of the libraries, so some libraries were open. We use some CTA buses, but the response is inadequate when the need is growing and growing fast. Companies like, utility companies like ComEd that have been involved in serious racketeering and corruption allegations cannot renew their contracts and make even yet more money, and telling their own customers that they cannot help in any way to relieve, especially low-income families. So I think that what right now is what's changed a bit is the level of accountability that we're trying to put on companies like ComEd. But what is not changed much is the will of the council that seem to be very quiet when it comes to holding corporations accountable, but yet are very quick to call the first or the second black progressive mayor since Mayor Washington when he's talking about taxing the ultra rich and taxing corporations. So the political will has not changed much, but I tell you that there's many more communities even more determined to push them to do the right thing.
Yeah, as my friend over here just mentioned, we've just been through one severe heat wave, and it's only mid-July now. We don't have an August City Council meeting, and yet the head of the OEMC and other bodies are under the mayor, and he could threaten their jobs, frankly, if they don't do the kind of reapportionment of resources as Dr. Howard mentioned. What do you call on Mayor Johnson to do, given that we don't have time to introduce legislation, pass it before perhaps another deadly heat wave before the summer is over? What do you ask him to do vis-a-vis the OEMC head?
Yes, that's a great question. And one of the things that we have been lobbying, not only the city, but Mayor Johnson, but also the state and Governor Pritzker, is that we are in a state of emergency. When federal dollars that by the billions are being threatened and maybe will not be received, we even talk about food assistance that is at risk right now. We have 550,000 more people who may not be having access to medical care when they cut off Medicare in our communities. So what we ask in the state to declare a state of emergency, we have to use our executive power to make sure that we save lives. And the other thing I think Mayor Johnson has been clear, and I have supported, is holding those departments accountable. He has said clearly and publicly that those who are not in the program of saving lives and putting money and putting the money where the departments that are needed should step aside. I was clear, and I think now people have the consequences. And I'll tell you, be clear, I'm not in the business of identity politics either. We saw how the CEO of CPS wasted precious time trying to negotiate his own contract to go somewhere else while we did not prepare on emergency responses for schools, even ICE agents coming to our communities. And again, this is a responsibility to all of us. And I think that all of those public elected and department heads that are not in the business and the vision of public investment and saving lives, who should step aside. And those who are refusing are at disservice, as Mr. Martinez did to the city, and clearly you can see the consequences of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further questions for us today? If not,
Anybody else who's not in the press?
if not, thank you so much for attending our press conference and making sure that Dr. Judy King.
Yeah, please. Dr. Judy King.
It's just a little kind of irritation I have. I agree with a lot of what, pretty much everybody said up here. As far as needing more funding for this and that, attention to older people and people who are isolated is a real issue. And we need some changes with buildings to check out some of these buildings and make sure that their air conditioning is there and and do well-being checks. But I've been looking a little bit at the budget, 2025 budget, and not just the 2025, but year in and year out, there's money in the budget that is not used. In the health department, which we need their data too, and they're not giving us data. There are, I believe it's 295 or 296 vacancies. Okay, and people wanted more money to go to the health department, but we have to hire people. We have to have people to do the work, and it's not happening. People want to expand the alternate response. Right now, in the budget, they have budgeted for 20 teams. I think there's only 8 or 7, and the last time I looked, a couple of days ago, there are only 6 EMTs. Okay, if you're going to pair an EMT with a clinician, how many teams do you have? So, but there's money for 20. Okay, and so there's a lot of reserve balance money in a lot of the grants, immunizations, epidemiology. There's a lot of reserve. If you look at the budget that was passed and go through, it's close to $400 million. That's in reserve balance, meaning when it was approved, they didn't map out how they wanted to use those dollars. So some of that money is, even if it's in a grant for certain purposes, can be, creatively used to address some of the things, other things.
I want to thank Dr. Judy King, who literally for decades has been a true fighter for justice in the area of mental health and everything else. No coincidence that we were colleagues together at Cook County Hospital. I just want to connect one other dot that we haven't talked about. And that is, there is one country in the world that is by far the best prepared country. The same country that has sent medical missions for the last 65 years to over 95 countries with tens of thousands of doctors, including, the CTA is still running. Including a couple miles south of here in 2017, the Republic of Cuba sent 3 family doctors and a nurse to work with the people of Englewood at the University of Illinois at Chicago to reduce what was and probably still is the worst infant and maternal morbidity rates in the northern part of the country, and sometimes the worst in the country. Cuba came here offering its hand. Cuba had 500 doctors and nurses with 50-pound medical backpacks on, sitting in one auditorium within 12 hours of Katrina, and Bush refused to even talk to President Fidel Castro. What does this have to do with today? Everyone in Cuba, and 3 of us here just came back 2 months ago from Santiago de Cuba, the second largest city. Everyone in Cuba on their refrigerator has at least 2 pieces of paper. One is what to do in terms of an earthquake and what to do in terms of a hurricane. And guess what's the first thing they do? They know exactly where every person who is not able lives. And the first priority is to get them out. They literally have 2 or 3 teams of able-bodied people on every block and every high-rise for 11 million people to get people who are disabled out first. Next year, Levantate por Cuba, Rise Up with Cuba, of which we're part of, will be taking a delegation to meet formally with block clubs, which are called Committees in Defense of the Revolution, but also with the country's civil defense, who is in charge of this coordination. This is exactly what we need in Chicago. Don't hold your breath that President Trump or Biden or anybody else is going to do it. So we have to do it for ourselves, and we invite all of you to be part of this. Thank you.
Just like to say one thing and urge each one of us to call our aldermen and encourage them to put in legislation to open up heating and cooling centers all over the city now, 24/7 heating and cooling centers. Thank you.